Hello again. So I'm releasing another episode today for a reason. Yesterday you heard Jen's story about losing her husband to cancer, and she briefly mentioned bethematch.org, where they found a donor match for him for a bone marrow transplant. And today I have a guest who also has an experience with Be The Match, and I wanted to air these episodes back to back because of that. So please visit bethematch.org, register as a potential donor if you haven't already. It's really a great organization that you'll learn a little bit more about in today's episode. Also, if you haven't already, join our Facebook group. It's called The Unbroken Circle. If you search that, it should pop right up. It's a great community that's growing from this podcast. Lots of people in there posting, asking for advice and supporting each other. And I'm also posting some photos, behind the scenes stuff in there as well from the episodes. All right, that's my spiel. Here's today's episode. Welcome to Unbroken, the podcast. I'm Savannah Levins. I started this podcast because in my life experience and working as a news reporter, I found everyone's been knocked down or blindsided or had their world seemingly turned upside down at some point. And for many people, it's cathartic to talk about their experiences out loud. And likewise, it can be therapeutic to hear other people's stories and know that there is light at the end of all darkness. If you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Just email unbrokenthepodcast@gmail.com and please rate, review, and subscribe. Today on the podcast, we have Kristi. In December, she was diagnosed with a fatal cancer. I recorded this episode with Kristi a few weeks ago before her scheduled stem cell transplant, which just happened this past Tuesday. I'm happy to report it went well. She's currently in the hospital recovering. Here's Kristi. Today on the podcast, I have the pleasure of having Kristi. Kristi, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I think, my voice. I think a lot of my guests that I've had, the adversity, the thing that happened to them happened a while in the past, whereas you are kind of right in the middle of yours. So I do appreciate you being here, and let's kind of talk about when this started, which you said was just December, really.
Correct. I guess technically it was the Wednesday before Christmas, whatever date that was. And I was getting ready to get into the shower, and I happened to just glance and notice this rash on the back of my legs. And it didn't look like an allergic reaction or anything like a normal red raised rash. It was more in the skin, brown, purpley, maybe the size of acne, but and I was like, what is that? That's not normal. And so it prompted me to call the doctor. Obviously I got in the next day and they did a lot of blood work. Luckily the doctor kind of knew it was blood related. And then as they got all the results back, she wanted me to see a hematologist. Well, that was made on the Monday before Christmas. Christmas was Tuesday, and then on Wednesday saw the hematologist. And on that day, he ran some additional lab work, and within that week, my numbers had skyrocketed. Basically, my white blood cell count was through the roof. I think it was over 80,000, and that meant my body was fighting something major. And then my red blood cell count was really low, so I was anemic, so obviously very tired and fatigued. And they basically, when he kind of did that, heard my story, saw saw the rash, this, that, and the other, he basically was like, I called my colleagues uptown. We think we feel you're battling with acute leukemia. This is fatal. We need you to go immediately uptown to the hospital. They're waiting on you. Go home first, pack a bag, do not waste time, and they'll see you there. And I was like, okay.
I mean, what were you thinking in that moment? What was going through your head?
I don't know that anything was going through my head. Honestly, it was more, if anything now when I look back at it, I kind of appreciate the fact that he was so methodical about how, because I'm a rule follower, I think, by nature. And I think if he would have done it any other way, I probably would have had a little more of a breakdown. But it was more like, okay, well, he told me I had to go home, pack a bag, don't waste time. And I did all of that.
Right.
check. So, it was kind of crazy, but in a way we just kind of did what we had to do, and we're in a fog and just kind of went to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So,
were you with family at the time, or were you by yourself?
I was just with my husband.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So then you pack a bag, check. You're heading over to the hospital uptown. What happens from there?
So, obviously, we check in, we get to the room. Sounds like a hotel. We we sit there, we wait. It's funny, it was just kind of ironic because I've been healthy all my life. I don't even have a cavity, let alone basically leukemia. So I was like, what in the, I didn't know what to do. Like, I've never been in the hospital before. So we sat there, and one of the nurses came in, and she's like, we have a problem. And I'm like, what's the problem? She's like, well, we don't have a patient. And I was like, no, I'm your patient. She's like, well, you look so healthy. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not, apparently. So, they just started all their procedures. And then that night they started getting some testing done, and they even started me on an oral chemo pill because they wanted to get my white blood cell count as, the goal eventually was going to get it down to 0. But they wanted to start it before it kept going up. So,
wow. So that's a lot to take in a very short amount of time.
Yes.
You said not a lot was going through your head at that point. When did your mind start swimming with, how did this happen? How did we get here?
I would say, that first night in the hospital, I did not sleep. There's obviously, I was trying, I was trying to rest and, calm down a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know that I've ever had a moment yet where I've just bawled my eyes out and I'm dying, or there's never been any of those moments. It's just been, methodical, and they've all the doctors, everybody just seems to have a plan, and this is curable, and that's all they keep saying, and they just kept me busy with different treatments, and I had to start preparing over the next couple of days for chemo, and so it's like sometimes I don't know that you really I had much time because there was just constantly vital checks and checking in on me and giving me my new drugs, which is my new normal, and, those kinds of things. And I don't know that I ever had a moment where I just started swimming out of control. Of course, there was some anxiety a little bit in the beginning and sometimes throughout, but nothing too crazy, which I was a little shocked at, I guess. Mm-hmm. But
what do you think about your personality maybe lent to that?
So my mom was handicapped when I was growing up, and my dad traveled a lot. So I was very independent, and I think growing up, and I think that had a lot to do with it. That, and then, like I said, I'm a rule follower. So I think since everybody around me had great confidence and they knew what they were doing and just told me what to do, I just kept following along like a little soldier. And, I guess, and I don't know that we had, and because maybe some of the situations at home, we weren't probably the most nurturing family out there. So I probably don't know how to connect to my deeper emotions potentially. I don't know. So, it's like I just went into battle mode, really, and it's true. You just have to kind of fight. It's, you battle like a girl or whatever. You just make sure you gotta do what they say and make sure that we can get to the points of cure and remission and all the things to come.
Yeah. So that was a couple of months ago. So what has happened in that time frame?
Well, in my first hospital stay was not as clean and boring as it should have been. So they did start me on chemo. So on Friday, so I went into the hospital on Wednesday. Friday, they actually officially diagnosed me with acute myeloid leukemia. And my bone marrow creates some mutations. And those mutations are, one of them's called FLT3. And this is getting into the weeds. But that little guy is basically one that they know will always come back. There will not be ever a chance that I'm most likely, I guess there could be, but they know from history and from data that particular mutation will return, and I will never be officially cured. It may take a while for me to get out of remission, but it will eventually come back. So the only way to cure me is to give me a blood stem cell transplant. Mm-hmm. So I knew that was coming, but obviously I had to get into remission first. Mm-hmm. So they started chemo on that Friday night, and I got 2 different kinds. One very strong, they called it the Red Devil. And lovely. Yeah. And then another one that was via drip, that was 24 hours. So the drip 24 hour was supposed to be 7 days. The Red Devil was 3 days. I got my Red Devil for 3 days. On the 4th day, I was having a hard time breathing, and I went into basically a reaction to one of my chemos and put me in the ICU because I had a 50% oxygen level in my body. So they stopped all chemo, fought that battle, and then I got out of ICU, and then that night had pains in my right shoulder, and I was like, what in the world? Did I pull a muscle taking a shower, or what did I do? And sure enough, the next morning my doctor diagnosed me with shingles.
Oh my goodness, it just keeps coming.
It was fine, so I never had time to stop and wallow.
Seriously, you didn't even have time to think.
So they gave me, they exiled me basically, because with cancer patients, we don't have immune systems, and so we had no ability to fight infection, and with someone with shingles on the floor, we need to get rid of her. So they exiled me to another negative pressure room in the hospital, and I lived with the cardiac ward for about a week and some days, just getting over the shingles. And again, chemo never restarted. My numbers had gotten down low enough that they were happy with it. So I guess that was a blessing, because I had 4 days of chemo, not 7. That was a win. But I got through the shingles and got back to the cancer ward and spent a week there while we waited on my numbers to rebound to a safe level so I could get out of the hospital. Got out of the hospital, and then about a week later went to see the doctor and started getting more information about the transplant and how this was going to happen. We needed to go find a donor from bethematch.org. My brother had already been tested, but he was only a 50% match. Doable, but not the best. And so I was going to do a week long of chemo for 7 days, and I was going to take an oral chemo that specifically inhibits my specific mutation. In the meantime, we've been looking at the registry, and we have had the opportunity to find several donors. We've nailed down one, and we are on target to start that process next. I don't know these people, and for the safety of their, identity, I won't know for maybe a year. But we'll call one a male and one a female. So one of them, the male, he was 100% match, but he could only donate bone marrow. There's 2 ways to donate. You can give bone marrow, or you can give stem cells, and stem cells have come a long way. He could only give me bone marrow for whatever reason, but he had the same blood type, so it didn't matter. It was fine. But for whatever reason, he also changed his timeline, and he needed to do it in 90 days, not within the basically 60 days or 30 to 60 days that my doctor wanted me to do. Because the longer we wait, the chance I get out of remission, and then I have to start all over again. So the female will say she was also 100% match, which is great. I really want to know who these people are, because they're related to me apparently somehow. But they are, she had different blood type. And and I'm not a doctor, but the way I understand it, and to try to streamline it, I guess when they pull the stem cells out of the bone marrow donation, inevitably they'll get red blood cells, which is your blood type. And if it doesn't match, they have to process it further. Well, I don't know why, but in Charlotte, the Levine Cancer Institute has not processed an adult in that way. They've processed children many, many, many times. They do it across the country for adults, but Charlotte has yet had maybe the chance or the opportunity to do it for an adult. Wow. I would have been the first. So they were trying to go down that road. They were working with the labs to get them prepared to go that route. But miraculously, the team happened to just go back on to bethematch.org, and somebody had registered within the week and was 100% match, willing to give stem cells. So it doesn't matter whether it's the same blood type or not. She wasn't. And we're moving forward with that one.
Do you know what the process is of donating stem cells? Because I'm vaguely familiar with donating bone marrow, but not stem cells.
So it's... Again, I'm, based on what I'm hearing, and I've not done a ton of research, but...
Right. This is not a medical podcast.
Yes, this is not a medical podcast. Based on the dumbed down version, the donor really needs to only take a shot for 5 days in their abdomen area, and that particular medicine will it tells the body to release the stem cells out of the bone marrow, and then it floats in the bloodstream. And so all they have to do at the end of those 5 days is basically give blood.
Wow.
And then there's machines and such that separate stem cells from blood, and then so within 40, so she's going to do that process, and then within 48 hours it'll be injected in me.
Wow. And just for a little bit of background for the listeners, BeTheMatch.org is an incredible organization. All you have to do is donate saliva. I believe you just put it in a little tube, a swab, a cheek swab. I did it years ago in college. My sorority put an event together. It's so simple and so important. So if you haven't done that yet and can, I would seriously advise that you do that. It's a great organization. So you get this news. Is it a bit of a relief, or are you still, you still are scheduled for it, right?
I'm still scheduled. Yep. Yeah. We go into the hospital April 3rd, and I start another round of chemo to kill everything. Now this time, it's going to be basically the same, but I'm going to get different chemo because they already know that I'm going to have a reaction if they would have given me the other stuff. And then they are trying to basically kill my bone marrow is what they're going to do. And so that's your blood making factory. So it sounds really crazy. Yeah, but they'll do 4 days of heavy chemo and then give me a rest day, and then they will inject me with the stem cells. I've had a couple nurses recently tell me, I know it sounds so, whoa, but it's like pretty anticlimactic. I'm like, okay. But yeah, once they do that, and then my husband describes it as like little seeds. So, then we just have to wait on those little seeds to get planted in my bones, I guess, and make new bone marrow and therefore make new blood. What's one thing that's going to be kind of interesting to watch is with this donor, she has a different blood type than I do. So there is a chance my blood type could change. So they will continue to monitor that as well. So if I need transfusions or anything during the process, they'll have to just pay attention to what blood type I have.
Yeah. Are you still in the mindset of, all right, here's the next thing, and I'm going to check it off, and then I'll check that off, or is your mind starting to swim a little bit more?
I would say I'm still checking things off. Mm-hmm. However, my perspective is starting to change a little bit. I won't doubt that, yes, there's probably been a moment or two where I think about why, and but then again, I think sometimes that's a good way to look at things because, I guess I am a firm believer that things happen for a reason. And, not that I expect to have leukemia to teach me a lesson, but, maybe there is something that I needed to soften or learn or strengthen or I don't know, reconnect with and ultimately change. And so, I have been noticing, I have a huge support system that I guess I knew existed, but didn't know that it existed to the extent that it did, and how many lives I've touched, and and then on that note, I guess I've also maybe softened a little bit. I mentioned earlier, maybe not being the most nurturing personality per se, but I've definitely have kind of found a new community in, I guess, the cancer community, that we're all now brothers and sisters in this, and it's kind of a new found friendship, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I've had people recently even stop me in different places around town and ask me, I guess it's obvious because I don't have hair, and they ask me, or say something to me about their own chemo or cancer journey, or maybe their moms or something like that. So it's been a little more eye-opening in that respect, that, instead of floating around and being in my own little bubble, I think we're all going through something, and so it's kind of been helpful there.
Yeah. Would your advice to maybe someone going through this themselves, or has a loved one going through a diagnosis like this, would your advice be to look forward? Because that seems like what you're doing. That seems to be your source of strength.
Yes, I think 100%. You make your own weather, really, and you choose. I didn't choose to have leukemia, but I choose the way I react to it. And so I really feel that you have to be positive. And even, all our doctors and nurses say the same thing, and I've even had people tell me they have their own friends and family that have been going through cancer that don't, I keep being told I'm inspiring people. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing differently. I'm not doing anything differently. But they're like, no, we've had other family members go through cancer and they don't treat it like this. And it's hard on us because when they see them going through this, it's hard. But then to see them also give up or have more of a depleted attitude about it, it's hard. How do you support someone that's depleted? But it's helpful for even others to support you if you're positive. So I'd highly recommend being positive and keep moving forward, and keep finding the little lessons to be learned, or at least enjoy the moment. Yeah, that's been probably another lesson I've learned.
I was about to say, what's been your maybe biggest takeaway after all of this about yourself, about life, anything?
Well, I guess I probably hit a bunch of them already, but I guess maybe that living in the moment. You can't take things for granted. I mean, I've had things happen over my life where people have been hit by a car, or and died, or anything like that, and that always makes you pause and realize I could be here today, but maybe not tomorrow, and you start thinking that, and I've never really thought of what I'm going through now as fatal. I guess because, again, maybe everybody's been so confident around me that it's not, or it is, but it's curable. So I'm like, let's do this. Let's get it over with. But, I think it does change my perspective in that, I want to make sure that I don't waste a lot of time anymore. And let's make sure I'm enriching everything I do and touch and relationships that I have.
Now, as for this donor, you said you'll get to know who they are after like a year or so. Is that someone you're going to want to reach out to?
Definitely. I mean, it's funny. Again, I guess if I go to that side of it and think the fatalness of this person's giving me a new life. They call the transplant day your second birthday. So I'll have a second birthday the rest of my life. And if I can and they are willing, I would love to know who they are and build a relationship. And highly recommend, like you said earlier, that with bethematch.org, I mean, you never know who you're going to change and who you're going to be able to give that second life to. So
absolutely. Some of these matches are so specific. Like, it just takes one person truly to step up and do that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, they look for, I think, basically like 10 specific genetic markers. And for a 100% match, that means these people have 10 out of 10 of my genetic markers, which is, like I said, kind of crazy.
Well, like I said, I've been, on the registry for 9 years now, and I've never gotten a call or email. And your donor was on for a week, and
I know.
Was matched up with you. So it really just depends. And you called that kind of like a miracle, kind of, that match. So that's all. I'm glad that that's happening for you, and I hope everything goes well. Do you have any final words before we say goodbye?
No, I mean, I guess kind of what we were just saying. I mean, I think overall, no matter what you're going through, you have to be positive. You can't let yourself go down, because you'll spiral, and you can't do it. So keep fighting and keep being strong, and just deal with it as they come, one moment at a time.
Well, Kristi, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate you telling your story. I so admire your strength, and I know people are going to feed off of that, and everything you've said has been really powerful. So thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to Unbroken, the podcast. We'll see you next time.